Little Fitzpond in Eddington, it's the Outdoor Survival Program with Bud Leavitt. Now, let's join Bud and his guests.
It's a lovely October evening, and we're so happy that you could be along with us. Well, the theme tonight, brought on necessarily by the coloring of the trees, the obvious date in the calendar, October the 1st. In Maine, you know, 2 out of every 10 people at one time or another at least go hunting, or at least they buy a hunting license. And this is the time of year, of course, when all of us concern ourselves with safety. You know, Maine has a remarkable safety record with respect to hunting and participation in the field. I can recall, for example, back in the late 1940s and the early 50s, when fatals in the field numbered anywhere from 15 to 23. Those were bloody days. But somehow there was a great transition. People took to learning exactly how they can enjoy the best of the out of doors. This meant hunter safety programs. Now, in recent years, we've had more than 20,000 people participate in hunter safety programs. Now, this has all been done with assistance from the Fisheries and Wildlife Department, independent organizations like the conservation clubs, individual organizations, service clubs, and companies like the L.L. Bean Company. They have all participated in the hunter safety program. Well, only recently, more than 180 youngsters went through the training course at the Penobscot Conservation Club. But this is a program and a mission that never can you let up at any time. So this is the theme of tonight's program, and one we think that you will like. As you heard at the outset of the show, we are at the Katahdin Camp. The Boy Scouts of America are on the shores of Fitzpond, the same site where earlier this summer we presented a water safety program. Tonight the theme is hunting in the field. Not all with firearms, bow hunting comes into the picture. One of the most rapidly gaining pastimes that we have in Maine. Not so long ago, there were fewer than 1,000 hunters who participating in bow hunting. Not so anymore. States like Michigan, for example, more than 30,000 people purchase bow hunting licenses every year. Nothing like that in Maine. And the number of deer kill, well, it's minimal. Most times less than 100. But that isn't the point tonight, or what's to be taken in the field. The point to be made tonight is we hope to show you, by your involvement and participation, through the use of a telephone, how you can enjoy the things. What are the imminent dangers with respect to firearms? What are the dangers with respect to bow and arrow? And they're there. They're out there, and a slight mishap means one thing: injured by gunshot or injured by arrow. My guests tonight are 2 people who have spent 35 years of their life, former game wardens of Maine. They have participated in the hunter safety programs throughout the state. They've always been available to share their expertise with you, the first-timer, the newcomer, and the veteran. You know, one of the things about injuries in the field of hunting, whether it be just a stroll in the woods carrying a firearm, or whether it be you, the individual, making your first trip in the woods with bow and arrow, the possibilities of injury are there. So with these 2 experts that I'll be introducing in just a moment, we hope a little later on the show that you'll telephone your questions to us. Ask the questions of these men, exactly how you can enjoy the sports, whether it be with firearms in the fall of the year or whether it be with bow and arrow. I'd like to have you meet my guests before we get inside. Russ Dyer. Russ is an old, experienced hand, and Dwight Landon. And as I said, a couple of good old game wardens who have one mission in life: to make the sport enjoyable. Russ, how have you been doing this fall thus far?
Well, excuse me, haven't been hunting much yet, Bud. We just finished running a hunter safety program at Freeport, and just as soon as the frost gets on the pumpkin, maybe the urge to go out the field will grow.
That frost probably will come this weekend. Dwight, you've been an aficionado, for example, of bow and arrow hunting. When did you start bow hunting?
About 1947.
You have to be one of the pioneers in the state.
Well, I'm afraid there's a few older than I
Really,
am
that
at it,
participated?
but I was one of the first ones that started the open season in Franklin and Somerset County.
Why did you move to bow hunting?
Well, deer hunting with a rifle got too easy.
Really?
And I also like to get out before the other deer hunters get out. It's quiet and no noise, and you don't have to put up with all of the noise and racket from these gun hunters. I'm not saying that I'm against gun hunting or anything like that, but it's much more pleasant to get out this time of year with a bow.
What's your success ratio?
Well, I'm batting 1,000 right now.
Are you? You've shot a bear, I know.
I've shot a bear, and I've shot several deer, and I've shot everything but a moose, coyote, and a turkey in the state of Maine.
Is this more of an personal enjoyment to you, more of a conquest to you?
Well, it used to be. Now I don't care whether I shoot anything or not. I just get out there for the fun of it.
You just like to walk?
I enjoy it.
Well, we got a good fire going in the fireplace. Let's go inside and talk some more about the various things that people use. And from there, after we do this, we'll take the questions. Now, you be sure to get by the phone. You'll be seeing the numbers on your screen, and give us a call just a little later. Let's go inside, gents.
He's got on the corner.
Oh, look at that fire. Doesn't that look great?
Beautiful.
Nothing like a fireplace in the fall of the year. And don't tell me that you don't get heat from a fireplace. We can feel this. Well, we've got quite a collection here. Russ, muzzle loading. Where is the danger with respect to muzzle loading?
Well, at our course in Freeport, we've stressed something about muzzle-loading hunting, muzzle-loading firearms. It's becoming a popular sport. Of course, Maine has a special season now for muzzleloaders. And there are some special safety considerations that should be taken into consideration with a muzzle-loading firearm. I think probably maybe one of the things to point out is the fact that this happens to be a replica, but some of these old firearms have been around Maine houses for 100 years, and they've started out loaded and still are loaded.
Still are loaded?
Grandpa or great-grandpa loaded them up and hung them up over the fireplace, and then someone put them in the attic, and then someone finds them this day and age and thinks maybe, well, that's a firearm they could participate in a muzzle-loading season with.
Really?
And many people don't understand or don't know how to find out if the firearm is loaded without dismantling it. But if there isn't a ramrod with the firearm, if they take a dowel the size of the bore and drop it down the bore, it goes to the bottom, then they can pull the dowel or the ramrod out and then see what the distance is. If it comes to the bottom of the breech, then they know they're dealing with a firearm that's not loaded. If that should come, we'll say this distance, then they know they were dealing with a loaded firearm, and that firearm could still fire even though it may have been loaded, as I say, by great-grandpa 100 years ago.
Now, have there been actual cases of people recovering muzzle loaders like this in old farmhouses, and they were still fireable?
Yes, it has happened. I don't personally know of any incidents, but
right.
They have been related and they have been documented.
Before we get to Dwight and talk just a little bit about bow hunting and so forth, what are the things that you have been stressing with respect to hunter safety? I know you did this as a warden, and now that you're a civilian out among us and so forth. In your warden experience, what did you find the most common mistake?
Well, when I started as a warden in the early 60s, in 1960, the mistaken identity accidents were still more prevalent than they are today. And then the advent of the blaze orange or the 10-mile cloth or whatever you might want to call it, fluorescent orange, hunter orange, those types of accidents dropped off. And then the more common accident was the mishandling of firearms, the accidental discharge, so-called. So we stress in our course there at Freeport quite a lot of time. We spend a lot of time stressing the safe handling of the firearm, the proper ammunition, not to depend on the safety in zones of fire. And from about the time I retired or the time I went out of the field as a warden, most of the accidents that I investigated were this type. There'd been a change during the years.
Why is it the callous handling, for example? I mean, for example, you learn to drive an automobile. Have there been absolutely concrete cases of total neophyte picking up a gun and going deer hunting without any prior training at all?
Well, I can relate an incident, I think probably to explain that best. In North Windham one day, I ran across a bunch of boys, young boys, in their late teens, 17, 18, hunting. They had a friend who had never handled a firearm before, and they took him out hunting. Gave him a bolt-action shotgun loaded with slugs, and when I came across him, he was walking in the rear of this with two other boys. This firearm loaded, safety off, pointed right at his companion. I had quite a talk with the boys about it, and they, as boys would, they didn't listen half-heartedly. 2 hours, maybe 3 hours later, there was a call. There was a hunting accident. Same group of boys, same situation. And there was an example of someone who had never had a firearm in their hand before, no training, didn't realize the danger. And this type of thing does happen, yes, Bud.
All right, when you come to gun handling, in a few words, what do you recommend? What are the rules, the cardinal rules?
Well, of course, we stress the old saying, treat every firearm as though it is loaded. We stress leaving the actions of the firearms open when they're not in use. Another thing that we've, through the years and experience, have found that many accidents happen because people are not familiar with a particular firearm. There are many different types of actions, as you know, and each action is unique in its own way. We stress that if someone hands you a firearm that you're not familiar with, if you don't know how that operates or how to open the action, pass it back to the person who gave it to you, have them show you. These are the types of things that we stress in the course as far as safe gun handling, proper ammunition for the particular firearm and so on.
You've got a bag here, pretty well equipped with emergency gear. For example, what do you recommend that one should take and why?
Well, of course, Bud, here we have a rather large bag and so on, and we realize that every hunter that goes into the woods is going to be carrying something this size. But in this particular bag, of course, we've got the blaze orange or the hunter orange vest, a garment or an article of clothing that's visible 360 degrees is required in Maine.
Let me interrupt you. When this first became law, how did you feel about wearing blaze orange?
Well, probably different than you did, Bud, because I had experienced and been involved in hunting accidents, and I could see right away where visibility was the factor, and that this could prevent some of those tragedies that I've been involved with. But many of my friends, many of the people felt that we're going to scare deer away, nobody's ever going to shoot another deer, and so on. But
were you personally convinced that blaze orange would not spook a deer?
I was.
You were?
Yes, I was at the time. I think that back prior to it becoming law, there was fluorescent colors and bright colors, and many of the group that I hunted with were using them already. And I felt that I was a believer that the deer were colorblind, and this wouldn't spook the
Was
deer.
this prior or after the test held down at Fort Devens?
Prior to that.
Really?
Yeah.
You were actually ahead of that study. Okay, what else do we have in there?
Okay, the other implements that are in here, or the other things, will all fit into a small bag that we do recommend that maybe hunters carry. This type of pouch, and someone can make up a survival kit from an empty film can or any type of device. Maybe the missus has discarded a purse or something, but this happens to be a little fluorescent orange pouch, and we have it on a belt. There's some waterproof matches. Matches, a person can make waterproof matches.
How many people have you found in your day without matches?
Quite a few. I don't know if I can give you a number.
No,
but,
I know.
But
But a lot of people.
Yes, we have.
They will go out there without matches.
Without matches. You can buy them commercially. You can make up your own by dipping them in paraffin. Matches that fire is what's between you and a bad time.
Right, right.
We've got a little
Where does the cord come into play?
Well, you can do all kinds of things with cord. You can fashion a shelter. You can use this to, if someone was injured or something, you can use it in the first aid operation. Cord can be used with some fish hooks if you're lost in the wild, with
Right.
any
Right.
number of things. I mean, we could sit here and probably think of
Right,
anything.
1,000 reasons.
1,000 reasons to have a cord with you. Compass. We recommend that the person have two. Someone gets lost in the woods many times, right off quick, they believe, no, I'm not wrong, that compass is wrong. Well, you can eliminate that phobia by having two compasses with you.
Has a game warden by the name of Russ Dyer ever been lost?
Yes, I have.
You have?
Sure.
And did you believe it?
Oh, I believed it. I had to convince myself to believe it.
Did you really?
A person that's lost or a person that's turned around, it's pretty difficult to look at that and say that your head is wrong and the compass is right. I think we've all had the feeling that we got. But we recommend two.
And if you don't come out with at least raisins or something, you'll be the first warden or ex-warden that I ever met that didn't bring food.
Yeah, we've got a...
Oh, you do? All right.
This is a little solo survival kit. This particular thing has got Band-Aids and matches and chocolate and chewing gum and
Neat.
various things in there.
Neat. Looks like a can of sardines. Excellent.
But a person can make up a kit
Right,
from
right.
household items. There's a knife in this box, pocket knife along with the hunting knife and so on. There's a match case, a whistle
So
for signaling.
by packing this properly, you can get it all in a little...
It'll all go in there.
The only thing I object to, what you said, is possibly using Mother's old purse. I can't imagine a deer hunter going through the woods with a woman's purse. Dwight Landon, I can't see where there are too many reasons to get hurt bow hunting. Tell me a few. I'll be your foil.
Well, number one, without this little piece of equipment right here, this is an arm guard. I've seen people have a lump come up on their arms, big as an egg, and also they had ruptured blood vessels where this string, when it touches off, ruptures those blood vessels. So it's a good idea to wear this. It not only protects your arm, but it also keeps your clothing out of the way of the bow. Number two, any one of these broadheads are razor sharp. You've got to be very careful that you don't get it onto this string, because I could pass that over that string. If it cut 2 or 3 strands, this whole bow could blow up on me. So there's another reason why you have to be careful. Now, in tree stands, a lot of these deer hunters are getting better results hunting from tree stands. And if you happen to climb a tree and on the way up, one of these arrows drop out of your bow, and it should land down in the bushes like this, and you forget it. You see a deer and you get a little excited, and you maybe shoot at the deer. And when you come down the tree in a hurry, you forget that arrow's down, and you jump the last 3 or 4 feet. And if that strikes you in the leg and goes into your leg, there have been cases where people have bled to death by landing on one of these arrows. Another thing, anybody that hunts out of a tree stand should tie themselves to the tree with a rope or a strap around the tree and around their waist.
Right.
Because in the excitement of shooting a deer, there's been several cases of people forgetting they're up that tree and they just step right off and they drop maybe 12 feet. And it ends up in broken legs, broken hips, and this has happened. And you never should hunt with a bow without this hood to cover up these broadheads, because if you're walking through the woods and you happen to stub your toe and fall down, and this broadhead could hit you anywhere. I have seen a quiver that's made like this with no hood on it, and it's the most dangerous thing you can hunt with, because these are razor sharp, and the whole idea of keeping them sharp is so that a deer will bleed out very rapidly.
Dwight, they're asking the question out there, and they'll probably telephone us. How effective is this when you make the proper hit on a deer?
Very effective. I have shot several deer that one of them went maybe 23 feet, and that's as far as he got. I shot a bear with it, and he walked 200 feet.
200 feet?
200 feet, and he went down and he couldn't get up. This arrow went the whole length of him. It went in here, and it went way down, and then The broadhead was just sticking out through the hind quarter.
Okay, let's get to distance. What's the most effective range?
I wouldn't shoot at a deer over 45 yards. We recommend that everybody stay under 45 yards because we don't want deer running around with arrows sticking out of them. It isn't that the arrow wouldn't go through, but most people can't get that accurate beyond 45 yards.
You agree with him?
I wouldn't disagree with Dwight.
You wouldn't disagree with Dwight?
When it comes to bow hunting. I know his expertise in that area.
Dwight, have we made great gains, the popularity in bow hunting?
Yes, we have. When we started in 1947, I believe it was, we started with 2 counties, Franklin and Somerset. The first year we shot 5 deer, and we maybe licensed, maybe 40 or 50 hunters. The last report, I don't know, it was last year, they shot 129 deer somewhere along there, and we're getting a lot of, I don't know the exact figures, the number of licenses we're selling to archers, but just the other day I heard of archers coming in from New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Vermont, so they're beginning to come in to the southern part of the state, and I'm sure this is a sport that's really going to grow.
It sure is. Well, we're ready to take your questions, and if you look onto your screen, the top number is collect from New Hampshire and Canada, and the bottom number is toll-free inside the state of Maine. We'd be delighted to field any of the questions that you have, but let's keep them confined to safety with respect to firearms and with bow hunting. In the meantime, let's continue talking. When we get the first call in, we'll go from there. But do you agree, Russ, that the hunter safety program has contributed immensely towards better safety, you feel?
Oh, I really believe it has. I was first involved with it in the early 60s, and we were running a few boys and girls through at that point. I think that this has been the second year that I've worked with Dwight with our program in Freeport, and this year it was very noticeable, the fathers and sons and the fathers and daughters and the mothers that were involved in the program. I think primarily a lot of people thought at first this was for the young people, and now we're really picking up a lot of adults in the program also. And there's no doubt in my mind that this has made hunting one of the safest sports that one can participate in.
We're ready. Good evening, and where are you calling from?
Bud Leavitt, I'm calling from Rockland, Maine.
From Rockland, yes, sir.
Sure, this is Dick Freeman.
Yes, Dick. Good to see you.
I'd like to know what those wardens think of that moose hunt they had. Think they should abolish it, or should they have it?
All right. Russ Dyer is former chief game warden, and I'll ask for Russ' opinion. What is your view with respect to the moose hunt?
Okay, I view moose hunting as this. There will be those that will argue that it's not a sport and that we shouldn't participate in that type of activity. I know what the moose population is in northern Maine, and I know at this point it's very healthy. I also know that when Mother Nature, when it determines that there are more animals than the habitat will handle, then Mother Nature steps in, and she does this by disease. And I am a firm believer that that population should be kept at good, safe, healthy levels. And moose hunting, participation in moose hunting by hunters, is one way that this level can be kept safe.
Good evening, and where are you calling from?
Leavitt?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to know what your two guests feel about having archers be able to get a deer in archery season and then get a deer during hunting season. I personally think that there's some benefit for that, and I know that the people who would be against it feel that too many deer would be taken. Could you guess?
Yes, sir. Where are you calling from, sir?
Leavitt.
From Levant. All right. Dwight, this man, you've heard this asked many times. How do you feel about the overlap in the seasons?
Well, I don't feel that the archer will ever hurt the deer hunting, and so if it was possible for him to shoot a deer in the archery season and also one in the hunting season, he never will reduce the population of the deer that much. But you may have a conflict with a hunter that hunts with a rifle, say he's being discriminated against because he can't shoot 2 deer. So I would rather see the archer be able to take 2 deer in the regular archery season rather than mix it up with the hunting and the bow hunting and the deer hunting.
Good evening, and where are you calling from?
Alfred.
Yes, sir.
I was wondering on the safety, when you go buy a hunting license. Now, I was wondering if the state's thought of any kind of test you'd have to take, because I know people that go in the woods that are colorblind, and I met people in there that are not too safe. I mean, anybody can walk right in off the street, buy a hunting license, and whether they know how to use the rifle or they don't even know the rules, the laws. And
Okay. Russ Dyer, how do you feel about prior examinations before issuing a license?
Well, the course, I don't know if a lot of people are aware or not, there has been legislation presented, the last legislature and legislatures previous to that, for mandatory hunter safety course for a person obtaining their first hunting license. 38 states now have that mandatory hunter safety course. I am in favor of that. I have seen the type of things that the person mentions, the caller, and I think that possibly we should have at least a round peg in a round hole or a square peg in a square hole examination for first-time hunter license.
Good evening, and where are you calling from?
Hello.
Good evening.
Yes, I'm calling from St. John, New Brunswick.
St. John, New Brunswick, yes.
Yes. I was wondering if I'd be just starting out to hunt deer with a bow. And I was just wondering what would be good for a person to start out. What kind of a bow, how many pound pressure, how would he go about?
Excellent question. Mr. Landon will answer that. For the newcomer, Dwight, starting out as a bowman.
Well, our laws require that you have to have a bow that will shoot at least 150 feet. Now, a bow that has a draw weight of 35 pounds will do this, but I don't recommend this lower weight to shoot deer with. I would say if you're able to pull anything from 50 pounds up to 60 pounds, that would be the weight that you would want to get into.
Does that answer you, sir? All right, good evening, and where are you calling from?
From Holton.
From Holton, yes, sir.
I got a little tip here, Bud, on my grandfather taught me way back years ago. The warden was speaking about using not believing a compass. When you don't believe the compass, he always told me to take and step out my back door. Now, if that was in the south, why, my back door is in the south, why, then I would point the compass so that I'd be standing south, and your head will clear right out.
Have you ever heard that?
No, I guess not.
Well, I've used this for years, and it's really done wonders for me.
Now, let me hear this again. You step out your back door and you face south.
Well, if your back door is facing south,
right,
or east or west,
right,
you step out it and in your mind visualize it.
I see. Okay.
You visualize it.
All right.
And use your compass, and it'll clear it right up. Your sense of direction.
Okay, you're talking about imprinting the
in your mind.
In your mind, the sense of direction.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, and where are you calling from?
Scarborough.
Scarborough, yes, sir.
Yes, the Fish and Game Department have been pleading poverty for 4 or 5 years now. Where does all the money go from the last 2 moose hunts, which is an extremely amount of money?
All right. I'll take that question. Russ, do you want to take it?
Go ahead.
Well, for example, they used most of it in the last 2 years from the 1980 hunt, which was no figure even remotely close to this year's, which was almost 440,000. Now, with respect to Fisheries and Wildlife pleading poverty, typical bureaucratic bureau, they'll always plead poverty. We're paying the highest license fees we've ever paid in the history of the state. But by the same token, if you go to the department, look at the various projects that are underway, you'll see where most of it is spent. And many of us keep a pretty close eye on the department, and I really and truly don't believe that any of it is being wantonly wasted.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Good evening, and where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Bangor.
Yes, sir.
I was wondering, is it possible in the foreseeable future to have a bow hunting season for moose? Or is that something that hasn't even been discussed yet?
I have no knowledge of that even ever being discussed. And having a most difficult time right now to keep the gun season even every couple of years, but I've not heard that discussed.
Okay, my next question is, where would one go in the Maine area to learn bow hunting safety? Are there any so-called good courses?
You've asked the right question at the right place. Dwight.
Yes, we have a bow hunters club in Freeport, and I'm sure that you can go to that club and any one of the members will be glad to teach you how to shoot a bow.
Okay, thank you very much.
They have around 114 members.
About 114 members. Yes, sir. Good evening, and where are you calling from?
Hello, Bud. I'm calling from Bangor.
Yes, sir.
And I was calling in regards to the guy that was talking about, the tests and everything, and about people being colorblind in the woods.
Yes,
well,
sir.
I'm a little bit colorblind in the woods, but I think a person that worries about colors, going to shoot at colors, should have a test. Definitely have a test. Myself, I'd much rather. I've passed up plenty of deer because, I wanted to see the deer itself, not just go shooting at colors.
You wanted the outline.
Right, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that baloney is a lot of,
Just be careful. We're on public television.
You're
Thank
right.
you very much. Good evening, and where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Lubeck, Bud.
Yes, sir.
Several years ago, over in Canada, they were experimenting with electronic gizmos that when certain parties wore these gizmos, they had receivers and transmitters, so that if you got in a range of, say, 200 yards of another hunter, your beeper would begin to activate, and therefore you would know the exact location of that hunter. I wonder if the state of Maine is investigating this and whether or not it's a reality for the protection of hunters.
I'm going to turn that to Russ, but I've never heard of it either in Canada or I've never heard the thing ever used. Have you?
No, I haven't. More and more hunters are using the CB radios,
Right.
the small portables, but that's the first that I've heard of any warning radio signal that would warn someone that someone else was near.
I'd like to follow up on that. Was that New Brunswick?
That was New Brunswick, yes.
Huh.
That was New Brunswick, and they were having legislation pushed through because they had run several field tests, and they found it to be an excellent warning device prior to anyone taking. It was a piece of electronic equipment attached to a gun, and if that gun was aimed at another individual that was within, say, 200 yards range who had the receiver or the transmitter, the hunter that was getting ready to fire upon that person would know immediately that it was a person and therefore would drop the gun.
Interesting. I know nothing about it, but I'm going to chase that up.
I have a second question. In today's column, you said the state got $906,000 in a windfall thing for, a breakup
Right.
in the various departments. And you
Right.
mentioned also that $120,000
For hunter
was earmarked
safety.
for hunter education. Could
That's-
you elaborate on that, please?
Well, I can only elaborate on it. We've had one of the most successful hunter safety courses of any state on the East Coast. That it all goes towards Garrett Anderson's, his department, for the hunter safety trainers throughout the state, the instructors who conduct these courses in various parts of the state. It's a very small amount of money compared to many other states. These are all monies received from Pittman Robertson, the Dingle Bill, and so forth. So the program is pretty well established in Augusta, and I can tell you every nickel of it is used honestly.
Thank you very much, Bud.
You bet. Good evening, and where are you calling from?
From South Portland, Bud.
Yes, sir.
I've got a question concerning the muzzle loading season.
Good.
I kind of consider it a little unequitable, the way you're being charged for a separate license for about a 3-day season following the regular season. Being a muzzle loading afficionado myself, I consider that a little unjust, and I'd like your opinion on it.
You want my opinion on it? Boy, you know how to hit a guy hard, don't you? Well, we pay for a salmon stamp. One time we had a pheasant stamp. We have to pay for these outside activities over and above the norm. I mean, regular hunting, for example. The archer, he thinks he's being discriminated against. The gun hunter looks upon the archer as having a jump on him because he's got the early part of the season. He begins October the 1st. I don't think it's discriminatory for this special season, really, and for the amount of money charged the muzzle loader for a special season. I don't really think that is too much of a hardship, nor discriminatory. Now, I'm not a muzzle loader, and I know how you feel, and I know how the bow hunter feels. I get that mail all the time, but I can't answer that. I just don't think it's an unjust charge. Okay? Good evening, and where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Westbrook, Maine.
Yes, sir.
This is for Russ Dyer.
Yes, sir.
Known Russ for many years. Russ, when a city or a town stipulates town lines, no hunting, no discharge of firearms, how do you distinguish city or town lines when you've got like 3 or 4 or 5, 6, 700 acres of land where there's all kinds of game, there's nothing distinguished as far as a city line? Taking the town of Westbrook, we've got all kinds of acreage bordering Wyndham, Scarborough, Gorham, and even Portland. Now, how does the Fish and Game feel as far as if they happen to be driving down the street and see an individual hunting in an area where there's all kinds of area, and, you know, there's deer there, and there's birds there, and whatever?
Well, first of all, let me say this. No municipality or no government less than the state can regulate hunting and fishing. The way, of course, the municipalities get around this is by regulating the discharge of firearms. And they do pass town ordinances that prohibit the discharge of firearms within the town limits. They are town ordinances. I am, of course, no longer with the state, retired from the state in warden service, and I assume that enforcement policy is the same as it was before. These are town ordinances, and our feeling always was let the towns enforce their ordinances. To answer the other part of your question, if an individual has an area that he would like to hunt and is not sure whether that lays within a municipality's area that prohibits the discharge of firearms, my suggestion is to go to the town office and find out where the lines are. All municipalities, of course, have maps of their boundaries, and find out in this way. But there again, warden service never has, and still isn't, to my knowledge, involved in the enforcement of any of the town ordinances as such.
For those of you who just tuned us in, the boys in orange are Dwight Landon and Russ Dyer. Between them, they represent 35 years' service as former Maine game wardens. The theme, well, we've ventured off course just a little bit, but the theme is hunter safety as well as bow and arrow hunting. So that's the theme and what we're talking about, and we're fielding your questions. Good evening, and where are you calling from? Good evening. Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Where are you calling from?
Lincoln.
Lincoln, all right.
What do you think about an idea to have a family permit for deer hunting, suppose like a husband and wife license, and say charge $25 or $30 for the license, and then they can tag 2 deer for that, and I think it would make a lot of people, quote, legal. What do you think of that idea?
Well, I would suggest that you got a man right in Lincoln, Bob McCachran.
He didn't like it.
Pardon me?
He didn't like it.
He didn't like it. Well, Robert, we got an answer to that in a hurry. I don't know. That has some merit and was certainly worth looking into. I couldn't answer that, but, you know, it's an idea. Why not? Why not look at it? Even if Bob doesn't like it, I'm sure he'd concede that maybe it ought to take a little more study. Let's toss it out. Maybe somebody else has an idea in the thing.
Thank you.
Good evening, and where are you calling from?
Yeah, Gorham.
Gorham, yes, sir.
Yeah, hi, Bud. I've been an admirer of yours for years. I had a question I wanted to throw at Russ.
All right.
Okay, Russ, it's been Fish and Game policy for several years now to hold public meetings whenever they have proposed changes in the law to get input. I've been to a few of these, primarily in regard to hunting, trapping changes, because that would be my greatest love. There's been 2 or 3 of them. If you was at them, you know, it pretty broke out in a riot, because they give their proposed changes, supposedly to get input, and any input they get, they practically insult the people and tell them that, what do you know?
Well, wait a minute. Now, I'm going to hold you up on that. You're just a little off track. You got an idea for a show, and this is one of the things I have in mind for down the road. For answering this specific question, I've covered dozens of those, as well as my colleagues, and what you have to say, there are a lot of people who feel like you do. But really, the question is not topical for what we're here for tonight. Okay?
Okay, bud.
You bet. Good evening, and where are you calling from?
Yes, I'm calling from Westbrook.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question for Russ.
All right. He must be a popular man in Westbrook.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, Russ, what do you consider a good age for a father to teach his, now daughter, not son, a daughter, the safety of how to use a firearm to prepare her for when she goes hunting when she's old enough?
Excellent question.
I think with anything like that, with children, it might vary a little bit, but if there's curiosity there, if the child has curiosity about Daddy's firearms, that's the time to start with some basics. But generally speaking, 10 years of age is when we start with hunter safety programs. But if you, by all means, if you have a very inquisitive child about firearms and what they do, what they're all about, at least point out to them some of the features of the firearm and the fact that they can be dangerous. And but don't hide the things. You know, with an inquisitive child, if you hide something from them or call this a taboo, then they're going to find out on their own.
Excellent question, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good evening, and where are you calling from?
I'm from Coldstream Pond in Enfield, Maine.
Yes, sir.
I got a question for Dwight.
For Dwight? Yes, sir.
I've hunted a few years, and all the deer that I've shot are under 45 yards in the woods. So I'd like to know what is the most successful way to hunt with a bow in the state of Maine.
Now, wait a minute. I'm not sure I heard that. The most successful way or distance? You made reference to the 45 yards that Dwight mentioned.
Right. He said
He said he would not shoot a deer at a distance of more than 45 yards. Is your question, what is the right distance?
No, my question is, what's the most successful way? Because my experience is that you can walk within 45 yards of a deer, so what's the most successful way?
Okay, the most successful way to deer hunt with bow and arrow.
Well, I would say if down in the southern part of the state where we have old apple orchards and a lot of clover fields, the most successful way is make a tree stand. But if you're up in the woods where you don't have old apple orchards, and the first 3 deer I shot all in the woods just like I was out hunting with a rifle. I didn't use a stand. But since that time, since I moved down here, I've used a stand and I find it real successful.
Does that answer you? Good evening, and where are you calling from?
This is John Ellis. I'm calling from Belfast.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to know why they lengthened the partridge season to December 31st. Don't you think it would be a slaughter, shooting them while they're budding?
Well, again, we're a little off the course here. This conversation or this question, the three of us had a conversation prior to coming on the program tonight. It's a question that is not related to what we're trying to do. We're trying to talk about safety. That's a question that is a fiery one, probably more so than the moose season right now. But it's not a question we wish to take up on this program. A later time, perhaps we will. Good evening, and where are you calling from?
This is Jim Hudson. I'm calling from Portland, Maine.
Yes, sir.
And I'm not looking at the safety of the hunters in the woods. I'm looking at the safety of the deer. And I was heard a rumor that there was going to be a bucks-only law starting up. Is there any truth to that, or have you heard anything of it?
Russ?
The last legislature passed a piece of legislation that does give the commissioner the authority to have a bucks-only season or in all of the state or special sections of the state. To my knowledge, that will not happen this hunting season. I think there is a strong possibility that they're looking at some of the sections or some areas of the state in the future seasons to be bucks only.
If someone doesn't ask the question, I'm going to have to. No one has asked yet, how do you sight in your rifle to start the deer season? But let's keep going. Maybe someone will. Good evening. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Millinocket. How do you sight in your rifle during deer season?
All right, Dwight. I knew we'd get that question with a little prompting.
Well, there's certain rifles that you can take like a bolt action. You can take the bolt out of the action, look right down through the barrel, set up your sight maybe at 100 yards, and this is called bore sighting. And then you put your action back in and shoot your rifle, and you should be pretty close onto the bullseye. And then from there you can adjust your sights up and down, right or left, to bring you in on the target.
Okay, we've sighted in the gun. Good evening, and where are you calling from?
Yes, I'm calling from Saco.
Yes, sir.
And I'd like to ask the gentleman on the far left why the Fish and Game Department offers a bow hunting season on Cape Elizabeth, okay, only to people who can pass a test. I don't think this is fair to all the people of the state who pay for their licenses but yet are not allowed to hunt certain areas. How do you feel about that?
Isn't that a local ordinance?
It's part of the agreement to open up that area to bow hunting, that an examination was to be given to each bow hunter that participated there.
So that's a law, right?
Local
ordinance law. Good evening, and where are you calling from?
Yes, Bucksport. Question for Russ Dyer, please.
Yes, sir.
In regards to fluorescent orange, how does he feel about a camouflage gear of fluorescent orange taking the place of brown or tan with the greens worked in? And if favorably, does he know anywhere where one could pick up a suit of such?
I've seen what you describe, the blaze orange mixed in with the camouflage material. When the color is gone from the woods, the autumn leaves, a little later, it is quite visible. I have experienced seeing this type of camouflage, and it camouflages very well, especially this time of year, or maybe the 1st of November. I don't know personally where one can purchase that type of clothing right now.
It's made by Winona Company.
Is it? It's probably not available in Maine. Now, wait a minute. Does this pass the law? Visible at 360 degrees?
It's an article of clothing, and it has blaze orange visible 360 degrees.
Okay. Good evening, and where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Old Orchard Beach, Maine.
Yes, sir.
And I'd like to know, for two questions in actual, I'd like to know what happened to the black duck population. And we've been told not to hunt them. And one game warden told me, a sergeant of the game warden, told me that 76% were not available to hunt. I mean, 76% of black duck population is gone, and therefore we can't hunt. And why did they post it the day before hunting season, and I didn't hear anything else before that? And second question would be, not a question, but on the genetics of the deer herd. If you hunt bucks only and no doe, and you keep hunting the bucks, you ruin the size of the herd, the genetics of it.
Okay, you're making a statement. What's your question?
First question is, why no black duck hunting?
Yeah.
And the proposal of, on the proposal of no deer, no buck, no doe season.
Yeah. Okay.
Why for? It doesn't sound sensible. It seems like back in the 50s that the state of Wisconsin, somebody came over here because of the albino population and a runted herd in a certain area. They found out that too many bucks were being shot, not enough does.
Well, no, wait a minute. We're off. We're entirely off on something. You have to be the only person in the state of Maine who didn't hear about the public hearing with respect to the black duck population. The reason for the late announcement of it, the public hearing was held in Augusta. People were there for the full length and breadth of the state of Maine. So there was nothing secretive about it. Now, as to the statistics, 76% or whatever you quoted, I'm not certain where you got those from. We have a shot in black duck season, and again, I'm apart from what we're here for, because apparently we don't have the number of birds we did 5 years ago. So that'll be the end of that tune. Good evening, and where are you calling from?
Russ.
Yes, sir.
Calling from Sedgwick.
From where?
Sedgwick.
Sedgwick.
Right.
Lovely place.
Okay, a couple of points I'd like to make on hunter safety.
Pardon me?
A couple of points I'd like to make on hunter
Okay,
safety.
I hear you.
Okay, number one, I was shot once hunting about 25 years ago through the guts. And I'd like to tell everybody that when you have a weapon in your hand, if you come back to a camp or come back to a car, keep the muzzle to the ground and turn away from somebody when you're unloading the thing.
We believe you.
Okay.
And
the
said,
second thing, the blaze orange law was probably the best thing in the past. Everybody should dress in orange.
thank you.
And the third thing, keep up the hunter safety program.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the call. Good evening, and where are you calling from?
Yes, I'm calling from Brunswick, Maine, and I was wondering why the state of Maine doesn't have a crossbow season on deer when crossbow is probably just as effective as longbow or compound.
Again, you're asking a legislative question and something that needs to be put into law. Again, we're trying to stick to hunter safety, whether it be bow and arrow or rifle. So I have to move on to the next call. Good evening, and where are you calling from?
This is Mrs. Dyer, and I'm calling from Hollowell.
Yes, ma'am.
And first of all, I wanted to tell you that there are women that are watching your show, and I was interested to hear that woman call up and ask about at what age should a daughter be trained to handle a firearm.
Yes, ma'am.
And I watch your show faithfully, Woods and Waters, every week.
Thank you.
My question is, I was interested in the fellow that called from Lincoln to say that he thought it would be a good idea if a married couple paid $25 to $30 for a license and they could each tag a deer, and that it would make a lot of people legal. And I agree with this in our great state of Maine, and I wondered statewide, how would one go about getting legislation passed or something of that sort to have this be legalized if enough people are interested?
Thank you, ma'am. Contact your local representative. I mean, it needs to be put in before the legislature, and from there the wheels start moving, ultimately gets to the point where it'll either be passed in the lower house through the Senate and signed by the governor. It's as simple as that. It's not that simple. There's a lot of work on the way up through. But at least your idea has merit, as well as the man who called from Lincoln. Good evening, and where are you calling from?
I'm calling from North Anson, Maine.
Yes, sir.
And I'd like to know if the warden service would let a disabled person hunt from this car.
Good question.
Paraplegics are allowed under the law to hunt from a stationary motor vehicle. That has been law for some time.
Does that answer you, sir? Are you a paraplegic?
Does it mean that a man with rheumatoid arthritis cannot hunt from his car on a paved highway?
No, you cannot. You cannot.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, and where are you calling from?
Yes, Bill, I'm calling from Belfast.
Yes, sir.
I've got two questions I'd like to ask you.
Yes, sir.
I've got a 10-year-old boy that I'm going to start out hunting this year.
Right.
Start out shooting. First, what can you tell him, to learn and listen for? And two, what caliber gun would be a good gun to start him on?
Russ, Dyer.
First of all, if you're going to start hunting birds,
right.
We'll say you're starting with a shotgun. I think one of the mistakes that many fathers make with their sons or daughters is to start them out with the 410. Everybody says, well, they should go with the 410. The 410 has very little shot. They become discouraged quite rapidly. We recommend, or I do at least, starting with possibly the 20 gauge with light loads. And start them out bird hunting, get them used to that activity, and maybe rabbit hunting. If you're going to take them, deer hunting, and they are trained with a rifle, know the safety of a rifle, the 30-30, old standby, I would recommend that possibly in a bolt action type rather than the old 94 lever action, which has some complications that make it a little trickier firearm. Bolt action is very simple to operate. The safety features on it are simple to understand, and that's what I'd recommend for the type of firearm.
Dwight, carry this one step further for the youngster who wants to take up archery.
Well, he's got to be able to pull a bow that at least 40 to 45 pounds before it's legal for him to go out and deer hunt. He can go out and bird hunt with a bow that's maybe 30 or 35 pounds. And there are certain arrows. This is an arrow here that's made especially to bird hunt with. It's known as a flu-flu arrow. The wind gets into these feathers, so you don't lose your arrows every time you shoot them because it only goes a short distance. And most youngsters at the age of 10, their reach isn't long enough, so they have to shoot a very short arrow. And sometimes a short arrow can be too stiff for the bow. So the arrow will have to match the bow.
We got time for another question. Good evening, and where are you calling from?
Old Town.
Yes, sir.
For the second year now, we've been trying to find a hunter safety course for my 11-year-old to take along with myself, and I'm unable to do such.
Don't you read me every morning?
Yes, I do.
Well, how come you missed it this year? We had 180 youngsters right up the road to Penobscot Conservation Club.
I missed that day.
Huh?
I missed that day.
You missed that day. Well, that's too bad, but I'll tell you what. We've got people all around here who would be glad to help. Fred Toll in town, George Currier Jr., many others. Give me a call at any time, and I'll try to steer you on the right track. Okay. We got time for another? Yes, we have. Good evening, and where are you calling from?
South Portland, Bud. Just one quick thing about safety.
Yes, sir.
I realized 10 years of age for hunter safety, but I was on the National Rifle and Pistol team, and every time I broke a weapon out, both rifle and pistol, my children were there and wanted to look at it. I let them look at it. They became familiar with it. They pulled the trigger, even though it's not good to dry fire. They weren't inquisitive. And as they grew up over the years, none of them were afraid of guns. They never wanted to go into the closet and look at them. And every time they wanted to, I showed it to them. So I think the familiarity will do nothing but benefit those of us that have guns. And the problem is the parents will say no, 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 instead of taking it out and showing it to them.
We could not have ended the show in a better tone. That's very well done, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciated that very, very much. Dwight Landon and Russ Dyer, they have been my guests. They have conducted these courses all over the state. The L.L. Bean Company did its very best to help us out tonight, provided us with some of the things that we needed to put this show on. We attempted to keep the show as close as possible to it. 1 month, November the 10th, we'll have another show, Cooking Wild Game. In the meantime, this is a replica of plaque the Boy Scouts of America will be selling. And it's going to be available. You can help the Boy Scouts of America if you'd like a plaque, and at the same time, you'll get a setting of the building where we are on the shores of Fitz Pond, the Boy Scouts Reservation. Good night, everyone. Thank you for participating.
Dances in the sun, so joyously it calls to me, come join